Welcome to The Future Is, a podcast where we meet the people shaping what's next in business and life. I'm your host, Laura Kelleher, Honeywell's Chief Marketing Officer. And in today's episode, we'll be diving into the topic of smart cities, including what they are, how they work, and why they're needed for an energy-resilient future. I'm joined today by Matthew Britt, General Manager of Smart Cities and Communities at Honeywell. Welcome, Matthew.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
We're really glad to have you here today.
Great.
So to start us off, why don't you just tell us a little bit about what is a smart city and what does it mean to the average person?
A smart city is one that uses technology and data-driven solutions to help improve quality of life of its residents and help improve operational efficiency within the municipal government. One thing it is not, though, is really something that is just sprinkled on top that just makes everything better, right? It's a really comprehensive approach at really transforming the way cities work and think.
So what are some of the misconceptions about smart cities, and what do you think people should know about them?
I think one of the biggest things is that people often associate smart cities with surveillance. And in reality, while public safety has often been a key part of smart cities, it's really just one factor that is part of the smart city ecosystem. But it's really about how, everything from how people move around a city more effectively, how a city can become more resilient in its infrastructure and be able to weather natural disasters and climate events more effectively. Really, all in all, how does a city serve its people better?
Where can people find an example of a smart city today?
It's funny because the term smart city implies that there are dumb cities, right? And that couldn't be farther from the truth. The reality is that every city is doing certain things that fall into that smart city category. But, there's certain cities that get a lot of press, cities like Singapore, where, they have digitized really their entire government and made it extremely easy for its citizens to interact with the government. Everything from, healthcare, digital healthcare to, complete, traffic management and efficiency in that regard. One of the cities that we're most proud of at Honeywell is the new administrative capital of Egypt. This is a brand new city capital that's being developed to replace Cairo as the capital of Egypt, that's been built from the ground up with people in mind, right? So everything from, public safety to emergency response, traffic management, parking management, energy management, all accounted for, within that ecosystem of smart city managed by a common platform such as ours, Honeywell City Suite.
So then how do you see smart city development supporting communities' sustainability efforts?
This is something that has become increasingly important over the last few years and has gotten a lot more attention than when smart cities first became a thing. Lots of different areas, frankly. Everything from smart metering, right, which enables cities to ensure that we're not losing water through leaks and just helping generally conserve water more effectively, leveraging advanced leak detection systems. Electric vehicles as a perfect example, right? The adoption of EV is increasing exponentially right now. The grid that exists today isn't really well suited to be able to support all of that additional load. And so cities are leveraging renewables and battery energy storage to be able to support those massive loads that are coming onto the grid and be able to help weather natural disasters, climate events. We saw in Texas a couple of years ago where, the ice storm came through and took out power for a full week, right? That meant no running water for citizens. So cities are adopting new energy technology and infrastructure to be able to help continue deliver city services when people need it most.
So can you tell us a little bit about how Honeywell is helping to promote and support the growth of smart cities?
Honeywell has been in the smart city business for almost a decade. We started in India in support of the 100 Smart Cities mission that was sponsored by Prime Minister Modi, that was primarily focused around public safety type solutions. But really, since then, we've developed a wide range of solutions that are all aimed at helping improve quality of life and really help transform municipal governments in the way they do business with the people that reside there. Some really good examples of that. I spoke about the Egyptian capital, of which our platform is really the system of systems that's going to manage that business. Everything, from safety to energy. Additionally, in the United States, we've been working with Accelerator for America. We announced that partnership last year, where we have partnered with 5 U.S. cities: the city of San Diego, Louisville, Cleveland, Waterloo, and Kansas City, really to help them define their strategic priorities for smart cities and help them then determine what those high impact projects are that would be eligible for grant money under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act passed by US Congress in 21. Because, there's really this unprecedented amount of funding available in the market today as a result of, several legislations that will help us modernize our infrastructure that really hasn't seen that much improvement over the last several decades. And so, really working with cities across various departments, everything from, the police departments to fire and rescue to, public works, really understanding what their real challenges are, and then, drawing those lines to where there is money available from the federal government to help pay for it, to really help advance these cities into the future.
So taking a consultative approach as well with these
Exactly.
communities to help them get there.
Yes. Another one, though, is with the Atlanta Beltline. And, this was a project that we announced, about a month ago, where we are working with them on a digital inclusion and equity project that, they are really transforming 22 miles of the Beltline around the city that, was once an abandoned railroad track, to really help lift up the citizens that live along the Beltline, which many of are, fall into that low to moderate income demographic of Atlanta, and simply just don't have the options that are available, to many other people. And so, we are deploying our City Suite platform and integrating in, several different technologies. One is around, smart waste management to help to provide, more efficient trash collection along the Beltline, which will allow them to, produce less emissions, from sending trucks unnecessarily, while also making sure that, the trash cans are empty when they need to be. Also we're deploying our people counting technology to be able to give them the idea of where is the Beltline being utilized the most, and where do they need to, improve investments, where the Beltline is the most popular. Lots of great things going on in smart cities now, especially, now that there's kind of a more clear-cut way to really make progress.
Yeah, a lot of ways that we're helping these communities to progress, right? And make better energy decisions and better productivity decisions for their constituents.
Mm-hmm.
So how does a project like this come to fruition? I mean, someone gets an idea, they say, our city needs to be smarter. Who do they call? How does it get started?
I describe the smart city market as kind of a tale of two markets. You have the developing world, where typically you've got a central government, leader that just decides that this is what we're going to do, right? India being a perfect example of that, or, in Egypt, where they have decided to build the new capital. But there's central government planning, and then the outcomes that they look to drive are really, sent out to market, and solution providers like Honeywell respond and try to bring that outcome, to the people. But then in the developed world, like the United States or Europe, it's often been a lot of pilots and what I describe as point solutions that are really just solving one problem at a time. You have a department head in the traffic department that wants new streetlights, and so they will go do that, right? And there hasn't ever been a real broad mission to really modernize anything or solve some of the challenges that cities face. And the good news is that that's really starting to change. The work that we've been doing with US cities has really been, instead of working in departments and having to then go one by one, it's being led by the mayors and the chief sustainability officers and city managers, where they're able to enact policy for their teams to go do.
So does it always work seamlessly? What are some of the common misconceptions or issues that you run into with these types of projects?
There's no pixie dust that you can just sprinkle on a city and make everything better, right? And part of the reason I think that in smart cities, there's it means so many things to so many people, right? And unfortunately, a lot of the things that cities have done over time really haven't been designed with the citizen in mind, right? The resident hasn't really been part of that process to really understand what the benefit is that they're going to receive. And so where we've seen a lot of success is where, that stakeholder alignment between both the city, the private sector, and the residents that live there, really come together to try and solve problems, so that, when a project is done, the citizen really understands what the benefit it is to them, rather than the government just going and spending a bunch of money, for benefits they don't see.
So better outcomes with really all the stakeholders aligned and leaning
Correct.
into the project and the benefits that come
Absolutely.
from it. So as you probably know, our podcast is focused on the future, but we always like to ask our guests to just take a look back. What did you want to be when you grew up?
So I wanted to be a lot of different things when I was growing up, but I think the thing that I always kind of came back to was I wanted to be an airline pilot. My dad was a fighter pilot in the U.S. Air Force for 20 years, and then a pilot for TWA, and then American for another 20 years. And it was just something that, I grew up traveling all over the place, and I really loved doing it. And, so that was kind of the thing that I was gonna do. But then, I graduated college right after 9/11, and, the airline industry just, was really in a bad shape at that point. And, I found my way into global business, and, it's been off and running ever since.
Found your way to smart cities.
That's right.
Great. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us today. Really enjoyed the conversation and excited about everything that Honeywell's doing.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
Thank you.